Hello everyone, and this is my review for Monday Night Raw on November 28, 2016. And well, I'm not gonna lie to you, this show was actually a pretty good one. They built up pretty much the entire show based around just a couple of matches and a couple of things leading into Roadblock and throughout the entire night. And they loaded up that third hour with a lot of their big matches to go along with it. Let's go off and start just right at the beginning of the show here. You had Jericho's highlight reel, and it was going to be the highlight reel with him and Kevin Owens. Eventually Roman Reigns gets thrown into the mix here. The one line in here that I fully remember in the terms of being funny, or in that sense, or actual... good satire was the whole aspect of Jericho saying that it wasn't him in a Sin Cara mask coming out to interfere. It was Sin Cara in a Jericho mask coming out, and I was like, okay, you went on that one. That was a good line, very good line there. Roman does eventually come out. They start having a back and forth with Roman Reigns. Honestly, this time around, not gonna lie, Roman Reigns actually came off decently on the microphone. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel It didn't feel like it was overly scripted, even though it probably was overly scripted in this one. But it came off rather well, and he even used the line saying he's like, the Kevin Owens that he wants isn't the joke Owens joke. He wants the fight Owens fight variation of Kevin Owens. And they also did a lot of good storytelling based off of the aspect of building more tension between Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho. By when Jericho is about to put Roman on the list, Kevin Owens just tells him to shut up, and then they eventually have a backstage segment to go along with it, to go along with everything. And they had also made a match for later in the night where Roman Reigns is going to go up against Kevin Owens. If Roman Reigns wins, he gets a match with Kevin Owens for the Universal title. So it wasn't like him just challenging for the Universal title. It's like, no, I want a match with you, and then if I win, I get a Universal title shot. It's like he almost feels like he's going to try. He has to actually earn the match. So, good way of going there. They had a backstage segment with Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens where they have a huge argument. That's where they also make the match official with Mick Foley, where he flubs his line, says it was for the Universal title, but it was just for a shot at it. And they teased that they were fully broken off. Jericho's going to leave as well. And they have a segment later on in the show where if you thought the whole aspect of this was just for Jericho to come back later and interfere in the match, they actually write off Jericho by showing him teasing leaving the arena, gets interviewed and everything in that sense. And as he's going to leave, he gets attacked by Seth Rollins, and he gets laid out on the on top of a car with a pedigree. Honestly, this is not a bad way of going. They throw the whole aspect of the swerve of it being just another tease between Jericho and Kevin Owens, them breaking off or anything in that sense out the window, because they had done that the week before. There's some tension there, but Jericho still helps in the end. They get rid of that this week by getting rid of Chris Jericho early on in the show. And this does eventually lead to Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens, who put on a really good match. Like I said, this third hour of Raw, it felt like it was a loaded third hour, and I will fully go into that here in a little bit as well. The Kevin Owens and Kevin Owens and Kevin Owens match. No, the Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns match, I thought was a really good match here. There's nothing really wrong with the match. I know a lot of people don't really care about Roman Reigns because he did kind of get shoved down everyone's throats, and he's not necessarily the best promo or anything in that sense. But he puts on good matches, and I think that's the more important thing there, is that he's putting on some pretty good matches, and sometimes he does decent with the promos. Not all the times, though. Not all the times. I will admit that much of it. But they put on a really good match here. Roman Reigns goes over with a spear in the end. I even like the aspect of Kevin Owens blaming the loss on the fact that, even though he had a fight with Chris Jericho, he's still his best friend, and he was only thinking about that later during the match instead of focusing on Roman. So they even play that up a little bit in there to go along with it. But so overall, like that was pretty good stuff leading into the Roadblock match with now Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens for the Universal title, and more than likely Chris Jericho and Seth Rollins, or in some kind of match as well. But here's the show stealer of the night. You had a couple of backstage stuff, backstage areas with Charlotte and Dana Brooke before what was going to be their match for the women's title with Sasha Banks. You had a decent backstage thing saying that Charlotte says she's going to be the only true star that's ever come out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and everything, like downplaying everything her dad ever did to go along with it. So they're setting up like a big celebration for after the match and everything. So onto the match with Sasha Banks and Charlotte. It started off like a really fast-paced, and it felt like they were going for something right off the bat, but they decided to end this one in a double count out, and it felt really weird on the aspect of, the way they built this up. They had it at the end of the first hour to go along with it. One sec. But then all of a sudden it ends in just a double count out of nowhere. Obviously fans are disappointed. I'm thinking in my head, it's like, okay, this is how they're going to end this feud? No? And I'm initially thinking that in my head, it's like, oh, here we go. Foley comes out, so they're going to continue on with everything. But instead of starting the match, restarting the match right then and there, it's like, no, we're going to restart it a little bit later tonight, and now we're going to make it no DQ, no count out, falls count anywhere. They give these two specialty matches. And actually, when they've given them the main event spot, outside of maybe the finish towards their Hell in a Cell match, these two, when it comes to that main event spot or just their matches in general, especially the gimmick match, I thought they knocked it out of the ballpark with the concept of the Hell in a Cell. They figured out what the concept of the Hell in a Cell match was. They played up to its strengths. They did everything towards telling the story throughout the match. The finish was not all that great, in the sense it just kind of came out of nowhere in that sense. But I felt like the rest of the match kind of knocked it out of the ballpark. And so when these two are given specialty matches, they grasp the concept of the match itself, and they knock it out of the ballpark every single time. And they did this again in the Falls Count Anywhere match. I've seen so many Falls Count Anywhere matches where like the entire focus of the match was it stayed in the ring, and they barely go and maybe they go somewhere else and they try a pinfall outside of the ring, but that's the only aspect to it where they kind of fail on that whole concept of a Falls Count Anywhere match. These two were in the ring briefly, went outside the ring, and then they went back in for a small period of time, but then the next time that they were outside the ring, they stayed outside the ring and fought around the entire ringside, up the rampway. It's not even one of those aspects of the match that's like, oh, this has to go everywhere in the building. No, they truly went with an aspect that this was just a Falls Count Anywhere match. It wasn't like an aspect of them having to drag each other to each and every single spot. It kind of just... the fight kind of boiled down into it. You had one little awkward area with the kendo stick, but that's the other aspect to it. The kendo stick was the only weapon used. And you see so many other times where they have to continually use like multiple weapons over and over and over again. No, they grasped the brutality of the match with using one weapon. Think about that. Only one. That's the only weapon was used throughout the entire match. And the aspect that they, like, each of them came up with a good, relatively good spot throughout the entire match as well. Like, Charlotte doing the moonsault off the announce table. Sure, it's no higher than maybe the top ropes in the ring itself, but still, it looks like coming off of the announce table, and there's a stage there, and instead of it just being like a ring, there's just like carpet and then it's concrete underneath. It gets a different vibe, different feel to it, and you could tell the crowd was into this match the entire time. And the finish of the match, using a handrail inside of the crowd to put on the bank statement submission, I thought was a good and creative way of finishing off that match. And the way I was initially thinking when this match ended, it was a great match. I was a little bit. It was like initially I was a little bit hesitant on that aspect that, again, it feels like they're hot potatoing this title between Sasha and Charlotte. But the story that they told in this match and the way that the match played off, it's like it kind of supersedes that. It didn't necessarily matter who won and who lost here. It was just a damn good match. It was a great match to watch. And they're still playing off this aspect that Sasha wins on Raw while Charlotte wins the pay-per-views. I don't know if they're going to continue on with this feud. According to how they played it off on TV, it was like Foley's like, this is supposed to be the final match between the two of you going forward for at least the time being. So do they just end the feud there with this great match and then maybe come back to it later on? Who knows in that sense? But like I said, just overall really good match, and you're kind of forgiven on the aspect of it being a hot potato between the women's title at that point, because the matches that they're putting on tell good stories. It's good action. There's nothing more to really ask or want from that afterwards. So initially I was like, oh, that they are hot potato in the title again. But then I was like, you know what? The more I think about it, it's like, that was just a damn good match. It was really good. And why would I even really complain about the aspect of the title being hot potatoed at that point? Because these two just put on really good matches, and their feud itself has just been really, really good. So, with that one being said, like I said, that one fully being said, let's go through the rest of the show here. Like, those were the two best points of the show. And they also loaded up that third hour with the New Day going up against Gallows and Anderson, with the New Day winning again by somewhat devious means. They're even doing a very good job of teasing the closer they get to the record, the closer they get to losing. They got really close to losing here. Like, Gallows and Anderson, really just took it to them. They were countering them in every sense of the word. And it took, like, a tit-for-tat type area where Anderson was going to use the tights to try to gain the win. They reversed the roll-up, and Xavier Woods uses the tights. This was a pretty good match from them. And again, like I said, they're teasing it more and more and more that New Day's going to lose. Towards the closer they get to this record, and maybe even tease it that they might lose it before the record even happens. So we'll see where they go with everything. You also had Cedric Alexander going up against Tony Nese. This was actually a very good, the match itself didn't really have much of a story behind it. Though they're kind of building up this thing between Alicia Fox and Cedric Alexander, so that's not a bad thing either, I guess, to go along with it, where they're kind of intertwining them into more other things in Raw to go along with it. They had Tony Nese go over, and this has been that one thing that they are going over, as you probably seen with Sasha winning the match as well. If you're in your hometown, you're losing. It seems to be a thing in WWE a lot. If you're in your hometown, you lose. It's just how it plays off. It doesn't really go any other way right now. So I guess the day that they actually have a hometown person win might be a little bit of a different story somewhere down the road. But this match with Cedric Alexander and Tony Nese, I thought they had some really good action inside of there. It was a good way of promoting 205 Live, which they also did a little bit later on, because they had a match with Rich Swann and Noam Dar, and again, both of them had a really good hard-hitting style match inside of the ring between the two of them. Rich Swann going over, they were promoting the aspect of him versus Brian Kendrick the next night on 205 Live. And, actually the commentary with Brian Kendrick I thought was really good. Like you got a different vibe from Brian Kendrick. Like he goes off on Byron Saxton for kind of pushing him a little bit too far with his comments, and making it feel like he's extremely worried about this match with him and Rich Swann the next night. And then, of course, Rich Swann gets a promo afterwards. And I just thought they had some really good stuff here. And it was a good way of wanting to promote going into 205 Live the next night. So, overall, I actually enjoyed the entire segment there because Kendrick's telling a story to go along with it, setting it up for the match the next night, and I thought they did a really good job on the aspects of that. Let's see here. You also had Cesaro and Sheamus in a bar fight with a bunch of people. They had just like a bunch of the local guys, and then a couple of other people to go along with it. I love the aspect that afterwards, even though Cesaro asks for a pint of Guinness, he goes nowhere near to actually drinking any of it. It's like I don't want to drink any of this. As Sheamus just like taking the entire thing, but it seems like they were playing it off. I loved how they played it off. It's like, we could be the best tag team only if I could stand the side of you. And then eventually at the end, it's like, why don't we be partners? And everything in that sense. So it makes it feel like that they are going to continue on with this Sheamus and Cesaro thing as tag team partners. We'll see where everything goes on that side too. Yeah, Braun Strowman going up against R-Truth. Strowman wins a really quick match. He gets attacked by Sami Zayn. But Sami Zayn gets stuffed, and just like the week before, Foley comes out and stops the beating. And this leads into a promo after the commercial break between Sami Zayn and Mick Foley, where Sammy's like, why do you keep stopping this guy? And then Foley goes into one of those impassionate promo moments, and then, of course, during that time, he stumbles a little bit because, like, his false tooth falls out middle of the thing, but he's like, yeah, it completely no-sells it and just keeps going. Eventually, this leads to Sami Zayn calling Mick Foley a hypocrite for, like everything that Foley had done, but he's stopping someone like Sami Zayn from trying to do what he wants in this sense of everything. And it came off rather well. I don't know where they're going with this, and it's going to be one of those things where it's like it leads to a what is the word? A trade or something in that sense where he gets taken off of there, or if it leads into something where Foley kind of allows Zayn to go off and do what he needs to do. Who knows where they're going to go with this, but it's going to be interesting to see where they go with this. I'm liking the promos that they're doing with them right now. We'll see where they're going with everything here. You again had another match with Enzo Amore and Rusev, and the way that they play off Rusev, it's actually getting hard to actually boo this guy, because his intentions are, his intentions are to, stand up for his wife and like an embarrassing moment from the week before and everything. And of course, throughout this entire time, like Enzo's throwing out insults and making jokes and everything. And of course, this is how this is proper way of ending. It's like Rusev just wants to send a message. He doesn't care about the match, so he knocks down Enzo and just kicks him straight in the junk to end the match really quickly. I feel like this is leading into something with Rusev and Big Cass somewhere down the road. We'll see where they go with that, but overall, not a bad way of going. Not like it just kind of played off how you think. Rusev wants to send a message, so who cares about the win? I'm just gonna kick you down there for like all the comments and everything that you had made over the last week. So not a bad way of going with everything here. And if it leads into something with Cass and Rusev, we'll see how that plays off to go along with it. You also had a backstage segment with Titus O'Neil and Mark Henry talking about a movie role that Mark Henry had gotten, that Titus O'Neil blamed Mark Henry for stealing from the Titus brand and everything in that sense. Not a bad segment to go along with everything, but it led to nothing else throughout the entire show, so maybe it leads into something next week. Who knows where they go with this. So with that being said, I'm going to end this show with the Paul Heyman interview. The Paul Heyman interview that was like just filmed before the show or something in that sense. The way Paul Heyman came off, the aspect that he had not like shaven, he had a little bit of stubble there, and everything. Just everything he portrayed inside of the match or portrayed inside the interview was just great. It was an aspect of. Like Michael Cole goes off, it's like, what happened? And that's and it's like, you know what? That's the $1 million question. And he just goes off, it's like, this was supposed to be a video game. It was supposed to be the easiest payday for Brock Lesnar. And now Brock Lesnar's been humiliated. It's like, you can't possibly understand that humiliation after everything that Brock Lesnar had done to lose that quickly to Goldberg. The interview is just great. Like, he even breaks down into tears a little bit throughout the entire thing. This is a really good variation with Paul Heyman. And he goes off to say it's like, now Brock Lesnar's in a mode that he has to prove something. And this is where he says, like, and it's like, and he plays it up even as like, Brock's never really had to prove anything. Now he feels like he has to prove something. It's like, how scary of a thought that actually is. Just all around good stuff. So it's like the aspect of saying is like, Brock feels like he has to prove something. So if Goldberg's in the Rumble match, so is Brock Lesnar. So now they have announced Brock Lesnar into the Royal Rumble to go along with. So now you have Goldberg and Lesnar there with everything. And obviously there's going to be some way of teasing for another match between the two of them somewhere down the road in the terms of a one-on-one. Overall, great interview from Paul Heyman, good emotions. This is like one of the better Paul Heymans we've seen in a while. And it just, overall, it got across the point that they needed, and they did a relatively, I won't say relatively, they did a great job with this particular angle to go along with it. This was a very good interview. So, overall, this week's Raw, there's really nothing bad to say about this Raw. I mean, there's some down points here and there throughout the entire show, but overall, this week's Raw was a relatively good show. They loaded up that third hour. Like, they led everything throughout the entire night. Like, if you took a look at, like, the whole Roman Reigns story and everything, the Roman Reigns, Jericho, and Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins being there, it kind of told a story all the way down to the Kevin Owens interview afterwards, and same with the Sasha Charlotte matches as well. Like, you even had the moment with Sasha and Bayley backstage to go along with it right before the match, and everything played off rather well. It felt like they were telling a story throughout the entire night, instead of just like, oh, this is happening, no, this is happening, no, this is happening. No, you kind of got a story throughout most of the night, especially with those matches, and it led into what was like a very loaded third hour where you had the tag titles, you had Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns starting off the hour, and they finished off the hour with the great Falls Count Anywhere match with Sasha Banks and Charlotte. And just overall, ended up being a relatively good Raw to watch. That's 2 weeks in a row, actually. That Raw was a pretty good watch. So there's a first in a while where it's usually like, oh, they had a great show. And then maybe mediocre to really bad of a show. And then something else. So they had a really good show last week, and then they have another really good show this week. So that's a first in a while. You don't really get that too often with Monday Night Raw, where you get two really good shows back to back. At least I felt they were really good in the end. So with that being said, that is my review for Monday Night Raw this week. I thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a great day.